In today's mailbag, we discuss whether the Lakers need to make a trade, which is particularly relevant in the wake of the LeBron injury, the best types of players to put around Luka Doncic, and how many of those players are on this team currently, and the logistics of covering a game at Crypto.com Arena. What's it like from arrival through departure? I walk you through a typical game night, all that and more.
Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another episode. On today's show, we're going to be doing part one of a two-part mailbag. You guys asked over 20 questions, so I'm going to be splitting it into a couple of episodes. It's been a crazy day with the LeBron injury update. I just got back from practice a couple hours ago, went live for about an hour. So if you want to hear my reaction to that, you could check that out on YouTube or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. But for today's purposes, we're going to be focusing on the mailbag questions. Before we get started, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. First question from Psychotically. Is it more realistic that the Lakers find a trade that brings them to contender status, or that the current roster improves and meshes well enough to contend? I think the answer here is clear, and I believe the answer is the Lakers have to make a trade to enter that inner circle of contenders. I felt that way before the LeBron injury update. If you guys go back to one of my offseason mailbags, my bold prediction for the season was that I felt the Lakers were one trade away from entering that inner circle alongside OKC and Denver, who to me are the two best teams in the NBA. And there's a bit of a gap between them and whoever else you want to put in that mix, whether it's Cleveland, New York, Minnesota, Houston, the Lakers, Clippers, Warriors, whoever. I think there is a gap between those two teams and everybody else. But I felt that with the right trade, whether it is an Andrew Wiggins, a Dylan Brooks, or maybe an even bigger swing, whoever that player is, with the right trade, I think particularly with the right fifth starter and slotting the fifth starting options as bench guys, particularly Rui Hachimura, Jared Vanderbilt, and Marcus Smart. If those three guys are coming off your bench and you upgrade that fifth starter spot, I think the Lakers can get in that conversation with Denver and OKC. Now, the LeBron injury is a bit of a wrench in this whole situation because we're not going to get to properly evaluate the Lakers through the first 10, 15 games, however long LeBron is out. He could be out longer. Remember, he's going to be reevaluated in 3 to 4 weeks. Does not mean he is returning in 3 to 4 weeks. He's going to miss at least 3 weeks, I think likely closer to 4. And then he also has to ramp up. And so it could easily be 10, 12, 15 games that LeBron is out. So that's a little bit of a setback from just a short-term results perspective. I think the Lakers will probably lose an extra game or two, but also prevents them from properly evaluating the roster and what some of the needs are and how guys slot into a healthy rotation. With all that said, I think the Lakers' weaknesses are clear. I think they're still lacking in two-way perimeter players. Most of their perimeter players are far better on one side of the ball and have one side of the floor that they have some real questions and limitations with. So I think balancing out the roster with some more two-way talent should be the priority. Specifically, I think some sort of 3-and-D guard or wing that slots properly next to Luka and Austin in the starting lineup, a guy who could defend at least 1 through 3, if not 1 through 4 or 2 through 4, some combination in there that can slot Austin as a secondary backcourt defender and slot LeBron and Luka as secondary frontcourt defenders. So that player is going to be difficult to find. That player is also going to be expensive. I don't think they can get it done with just a Rui or just a Gabe and a Maxey. It's probably going to cost cost a Dalton and potentially even a first round pick or some draft capital more than the second round pick that they have to trade. So whether that's a swap or multiple swaps or a first, protected first, whatever, I think it's going to likely cost them something significant. But I think this group is worth investing in, assuming it is the right player that they are trading for. I don't think they should just trade the first or trade Dalton or whatever for anybody. I think there needs to be a certain standard, a certain caliber of player that they make an aggressive move for. But as you guys who've been listening to me for over the past 18 months or so, I am team be aggressive, trade picks, go for it this season, not go for it in the future. And I think if LeBron can come back relatively soon, and this isn't something that's going to linger over the course of the season, I think the Lakers will have a shot to still be a home court advantage team and still have a chance to go on a deep playoff run. But I think the biggest factor will be if they make a move, because to your question, I do not think as constructed they are in that inner circle. I think there are pathways where if all these things hit right and Luka is that dude, which we know he can be, there's a narrow pathway to them potentially being a contender. But I think the real way to get there is by making an upgrade via trade. So between these two options, I think, of course, there's some nuance, there's some gray area, but I think between these two options, the Lakers need to make a trade, I think, to enter the real inner circle of contenders. And I think if they make the right trade, again, I think they can be in that inner circle of contenders. And I don't think that's the case for every team in the West. I don't think that's the case for every team in the league. Not everyone is one move away, but I think the Lakers are. Thank you to Ro for sponsoring this video. You know, on Buha's block, when I say 5 more minutes, you can count on me to actually show up and keep going. Well, Ro Sparks can help you bring that same reliability to the bedroom. Ro Sparks gives you the boost to last longer so everyone can enjoy more pleasure in bed. After Ro Sparks dissolve, they work in 15 minutes on average. Rose Sparks hit the bloodstream faster because they dissolve under the tongue, and getting harder faster means there's less waiting to perform. Rose Sparks' dual action formula contains tadalafil, which stays active in your system for up to 36 hours, so you can go back to back, round after round, and be ready again in the morning. Ro connects guys with a medical provider 100% online, so there's no awkward conversation with an in-person provider. If approved, treatment ships directly to your door. I'm not a real Ro user, but I'm excited to see if Sparks is right for me. If prescribed, new sexual health patients get $15 off your first order of Sparks on a recurring plan. Thank you again to Ro for sponsoring this video. Connect with the provider at ro.co/Jovan Buha to find out if prescription Ro Sparks are right for you. That's ro.co/Jovan Buha for $15 off your first order. Next question from JMZG8GN. Jovan, got some questions for you. Number one, have you noticed any differences with LeBron passing the torch to Luka compared to AD? And number two, what types of players would you surround Luka with to maximize his career with the Lakers? How many of those players do you think are currently on the roster? Thanks for all the content you've been releasing. Well, I appreciate it, JM. I think these are a couple of good questions. Let's start with the first one. I think the difference with LeBron passing the torch to Luka, I see a couple of differences. One, I see Luka as more of a peer to LeBron than AD was, and that's no shade at AD. I don't want to get it twisted with how great AD is, how special AD is. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think he's going to have his jersey retired as a Laker, but there is a difference between Luka and AD in terms of Luka starting his career with 5 straight first All-NBA teams and just having one of the best starts to an NBA career we've seen, period. And especially if you don't factor in, of course, we've seen guys like Kobe or certain guys win championships early in their career, but for not having won a championship, Luka is about as decorated as it gets up to this point in his career. So I just think Luka's at a little bit of a different status from an individual accolades perspective at this phase of his career. There's also the parallels between Luka and LeBron in terms of playing style. Like Luka has modeled parts of his game off of LeBron. They are both unconventional. Luka's 6'7", 6'8", LeBron's 6'9", but big point guards that play the game a certain way. So there are some parallels between, I think, their status at like the same points of their career. Luka has a lot of similar numbers to LeBron at this stage of Luka's career in terms of like where LeBron was at that stage as well. So I think they're more peers than AD and LeBron were. The second thing though, like those two things I kind of lump together. The second thing though is I don't even know if there's a torch passing. I think the torch was grabbed out of LeBron's hand and handed to Luka on February 1st or 2nd, depending on if you're on the West Coast or the East Coast when the Luka trade happened. To be clear, I don't think this was a contentious process by any means, but I do think there was like, they had been toying with passing the torch from LeBron to AD over the past few years, right? But this was Luka showing up. Luka is the new face of the franchise. Luka is the guy. Everything was about Luka from the moment he stepped in LA to how they greeted him, to the promotions with Luka, to his first game, and the way that, passing out the shirts and everything, and just the warm ovation he got from the crowd and from the Lakers organization, to this summer and it being the summer of Luka and the extension, and him being a big part in shaping the roster and him recruiting guys and all this stuff. Like, it's been a transfer that I think LeBron, whether he was on board with it or not, the transfer was happening. I think LeBron has actually largely been on board with it. I think he gets it. He's spoken highly of Luka. He thinks highly of Luka as a player, as a person. So I think LeBron is on board with that part of it and gets it. And I think Luka also kind of took it in a way that AD never quite did. And I think part of it is because Luka had already been a franchise player for the past 6 years and had been a guy who had led a team to a conference finals, to a finals, where AD, as the solo guy, had only led a team to the second round once. So I think that there's some key differences between Luka and AD, and this isn't meant to be a re-litigation of that trade or where each player is at. But I do think Luka, at the time of the deal, was considered a top 3 or 4 player in the league. He's still considered a top 3 or 4 player in the league. AD at this phase of his career, I think, is more of like a top 10 to 12 guy, which is still elite, still one of the very best players in the league, but it's just a notch below Luka. And then again, you factor like the trajectories of their career and their accolades and statistics. And, AD obviously has the international basketball success and winning a championship in LA. But I just think in terms of being the leader, in terms of being the number one guy, I think AD is viewed more as like a 1B. Luka is viewed as a clear number one. So that to me is the distinction between the passing of the torch and just that whole process. As for the types of players you would want to surround Luka with to maximize his career, I think we saw the blueprint in Dallas. I think he does well next to another high usage ball handler. So in Dallas, that was Jalen Brunson and then later Kyrie Irving. I think there's a reason why the lineup data with Austin and LeBron has been so good. And that's why I am bullish on the fit. I think there are some real concerns with the defensive end. And I think there are some real concerns if Austin continues to struggle as a catch and shoot guy in the playoffs. I think I've referenced this stat before. Both Brunson and Kyrie both shot 40+% on threes, catch and shoot threes specifically, in their respective deep playoff runs with Luka. And I think that is the standard, that is the minimum that Austin has to hit to have a deep playoff run with Luka moving forward. So I think that's going to be like the pressure is going to be on for him to deliver as a catch and shoot guy, I think, moving forward. But so that's one player archetype. I think the other player archetype is a rim running big, and we saw that in Dallas with Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford. We saw it even in LA with Jackson Hayes, and we saw the best stretch of Jackson Hayes' career, a 6-week stretch where he looked like a starting caliber center, in large part because Luka made him look so good. So that's another player archetype. And then the other player archetype is a bunch of 3-and-D wings, and we saw it earlier in his career with guys like Dorian Finney-Smith, and then we saw it later in his career with guys like Derrick Jones Jr. and PJ Washington. So I think those are the broad player archetypes that fit well. And I think the Lakers actually have several of those guys. I think Austin Reeves as a potential backcourt co-star checks a lot of the boxes that the pre-New York version of Brunson and then the more current version of Kyrie check in terms of off-ball shot creation and shooting and the ability to run the show with Luka on and off the floor. I think Austin checks a lot of those boxes. In terms of the bigs, I like Jackson in a backup role and more of like a 10, 12 minute a night guy. He's not anywhere close to the level of Gafford or Lively really on either end, but specifically on the defensive end, those guys are much better defenders, much better rim protectors and anchors of a defense. So that is an area that Jackson doesn't quite check that box. And then looking at the 3-and-D side, Lakers are lacking in this regard. I did like Dorian Finney-Smith, even though he had regressed as a perimeter defender to some extent. But I did like him for that role next to Luka. Looking at Rui, I don't think he's quite good enough defensively or quite mobile enough or just aware enough defensively. With Vando, there's obviously the offensive limitations. With Marcus Smart, there's the health, but then there's also just some of the offensive stuff with the shooting. And Jake LaRavia, who I've made the case for, might be the Lakers' answer in terms of like best two-way player or player who's contributing positively on both sides of the ball, though he's not the defender that Smart or Vando is. So I think offensively, with the shooting and what some of the stuff we've seen, like he checks a lot of what Luka needs. The defensive end, I think he's above average to good, depending on the matchup, depending on how he's being used. But I still think not quite at that like elite level or starting level that the Lakers need around Luka. So I'm going to be a contrarian here and say that I actually think the Lakers have a lot of the pieces that Luka needs. I just think they need some more complete versions of those pieces, if that makes sense. So with the center spot, like ideally you have someone like Jackson offensively, but someone who's probably a better defender. And then with the perimeter guys, you have guys who can contribute on both sides of the ball rather than just one side. However, I think if we're looking at guys that fit, like Deandre Ayton, I think offensively is going to be a good to even great fit with Luka. I think that there are some questions about how he's going to hold up defensively over the course of an 82-game season and into the playoffs. I think the early returns in the preseason have been encouraging, and I'm optimistic about him on that end. But it's one thing to do it in a couple of preseason games. It's another thing to do it over the course of a full season and in high-stakes moments in the playoffs. We have seen him do it before, but it's been several years since then. So I think that's a bit of a question mark. I think Marcus Smart checks a lot of the boxes of like he's a Dallas type of player that I think would have fit next to Luka. You just have some health concerns and some shooting concerns. Then Vando and Rui as bench pieces, I think individually you could convince me of fitting with Luka, but again, I think ideally a like more two-way balance with those types of guys. So I do think they have pieces that fit next to him. The guys I think best fit next to him in no particular order are Austin, Ayton, and Smart. Vando, they had a weird, like they didn't really figure it out on the offensive end, and it felt like they didn't quite click last season. I'm interested to see what that looks like in the preseason going into the season. Rui, we know it fits offensively. I just think defensively, if you have a front court of Ayton, Rui, and Luka, I think that could be a bit of a problematic defensive front court. And then I also like Gabe's an interesting one, maybe as like a back end rotation guy. Jackson, again, as a backup center. Like I like some of the individual pieces. I think that the collective is the issue where they're just not complete enough. They're not whole enough as a two-way collective that I would like to see more of those, Gafford, Lively type at center, or the Washington, Derek Jones, prime Dorian Finney-Smith type on the wings, and guys who can find ways to contribute more on both sides of the ball. But I think this is I've said this before, I think this is a big audition season for basically the entire roster to see who fits with Luka, who doesn't. And I'm really going to be studying the 2-man lineup data, 3-man, 4-man, just certain lineups overall, the starters, the bench, the closers, all that stuff I think is going to play a big role in who's here long-term and who isn't. Next question from Fun Size Lou. Please share the logistics when reporting at a home game. Where do you park? Where do you sit during the game? What do you do during timeouts and halftime? Where do you go post-game? Let's get into it. So I have the Los Angeles Convention Center parking lots laid out here. Never expected to talk through the parking structures around LA Live and crypto, but here we are. So I park in the West Hall garage. I enter on LA Live Way. I park in the West Hall, then I walk out, and then I enter crypto.com arena at the media entrance, then walk into the Chick Hearn press room and put my bag down. Previously, as a beat reporter, I had a designated cubby. Now I'm going to be out in the wilderness, out in the wild, wild west, and I'm going to have to claim my space, and it'll probably rotate game to game, whereas before I had a designated spot. But those are the trade-offs of being your own boss and having your own thing. So I enter, I will drop my bag off. Typically, so let's say most games start at 7 p.m. Pacific time. Most home games do. Some start at 7:30, but let's say 7 p.m. That means JJ's talking at 5:15. The opposing coach is talking at 5:30. So on a typical game day that's at 7 p.m., I like to get there around 4:30ish, between 4:45 at the latest, but ideally sometime between 4:30 and 4:45. Drop my stuff off, maybe grab a quick bite or grab a coffee, then go out to the court and watch guys warm up. Talk to people, talk to other media members, talk to Lakers personnel, talk to other NBA personnel, and just kind of shoot the shit and try to gather information or just talk about whatever, catch up with people. So do that for about like 15, 20 minutes. Might go back again and grab a coffee, or there's a lot of caffeine on game nights, and then go to JJ. So JJ will talk at 5:15. He's pretty prompt. He's usually on time. So he'll talk for anywhere from, for getting really granular here, he'll talk for like 8 to 12 minutes on average. Sometimes it's a little bit shorter, but typically I would say 8 to 12 minutes, especially at home games. Then we go to we walk through the tunnel and go to the opposite side, right past the visiting locker room. And that's where the opposing coach speaks. And then he'll talk, I mean, depending on who it is, talks 5-10 minutes. Then the locker room. So if JJ's talking at 5:15, that means the locker room opens up at 5:45. So the process will go JJ 5:15, opposing coach 5:30, locker room opens from at 5:45. Locker room will be open from 5:45 to 6:15, so it's open for 30 minutes. And then as a tier 1 media member, there's tier 1, tier 2. Tier 1's allowed in the locker room, tier 2 is not. I fortunately am keeping my tier 1 status. That was a big factor for me in deciding to go independent. Was I spoke with the Lakers and I clarified that I would maintain my tier 1 status. I did, so that's great. So then go in the locker room pregame and just shoot the breeze with the players. A lot of times the locker room will be pretty empty because they know the designated time of when we're coming in, and the players want to avoid us. So they will try to avoid us, but you'll have guys coming in and out of the lineup. A lot of guys will have headphones on. So you kind of know like that's a sign not to really talk to them or, mess with them or whatever. So just kind of hang out in the locker room. Sometimes they will have stuff on the board that we're probably not supposed to see, but then you pick up on like, what's the game plan tonight, or this guy's matched up with this guy or whatever. One interesting rule is you can't take photos in the locker room. You can only take videos, and you're only supposed to take videos if you are directly speaking to a player or interviewing a player, but you can't circle the locker room and just take videos of everything. So that's one little restriction. Like I've gotten in trouble. One time I took a picture of Nick Young's shoe thing, and I kind of got in trouble. Like I wasn't really supposed to do that. This is like a decade ago, going back to the Nick Young days, but supposed to take videos, not photos, in the locker room. And so hang out there for a little bit, depending on who's in there, what's going on. It might be 5 minutes, it might be 15 minutes. It just kind of depends. Then that's typically when I'll go back and either go to the court for a bit and talk to more people, or maybe sometimes do like a TV hit or something if a local news TV station like needs me to interview about something. Then I go back to the media room and I will have dinner. And they have a rotation of dinner. Then we'll eat. We'll probably re-listen to what JJ said pregame just to make sure. Like it used to transcribe with the beat writing group. I'm not going to be doing that anymore. So I'll listen to JJ's audio, transcribe anything that I need to transcribe, but I usually don't. And then just chill basically until the start of the game and continue to talk to media people or agents or front office people, whoever is in the media room. That's where everyone converges, and then head out to the court. Again, if it's a 7 o'clock game, usually around 6:50, 6:55, try to get out there and we'll set up. And then this is going to bring up my second graphic here, where now that you guys can see all of the sections at crypto.com arena, the media, at least previously the beat writers for me, but now I think I'm going to be probably a few rows back. The home media typically sits in section 114. The road media sits in 108. And there's a chance I end up in 108. I don't know where I'm going to be sitting yet, 114 versus 108. I hope I'm in 114, but either way, it's about the same vantage point. And then some media is in 117. Some media is above the 300s in the hockey press box. But typically, I would sit in 114 as a beat writer, and I suspect I'll probably be moved a couple rows back, and that will be where I sit moving forward. But we have pretty good seats. It's hard to complain. And to be clear, it's the 114 on the floor, not the elevated 114. So really, it's like, as a beat writer, I was basically right behind the baseline seat. So it was like second row. Now I'll probably be like fourth or fifth row, but it's hard to complain with the seats. Really, the only issue is sometimes the stanchion is in the way and it cuts off part of the court, but it's champagne problems. You can't complain about getting paid or just watching free basketball from a great view overall. So go and watch the first half. At halftime, we'll typically go back to the media room and maybe grab another coffee or a Diet Coke or something, or have a little snack, and then maybe go to the bathroom and talk to some more people. Go back to the seat for the second half. Then the second the buzzer ends, book it to my cubby, drop my stuff off, go back to the media interview room where JJ will address the media shortly. Then the second JJ is done, the locker room opens up, and then go in the locker room. That's where LeBron almost exclusively speaks. Luka often goes to the podium, so you're kind of bouncing back and forth between the locker room and the podium. Austin is also a guy who sometimes will speak in the locker room, sometimes at the podium, and then they'll typically send like 3 or 4 players to the podium, including Luka. And then maybe 1 or 2 players will speak in the locker room, including LeBron. So that is the typical breakdown. After they speak, I used to have to transcribe again. Now I will just come home and go live right after. So I'm hoping to go live earlier and at a more consistent time, kind of knowing my schedule. So I'm guessing sometime between like 10:30 and 11 will be more of my live time, rather than sometimes it would be like after midnight. So that is the breakdown of a typical game night. It takes me about 30 minutes to get to the arena. It takes me about 15 minutes to get back. So I would say on average, let's say I'm trying to get there at 4:30, typically leave around 4, and then I'm not wrapping with stuff at the game until at least 10:15. So then getting home around 10:30, 10:45, depending on when I leave, and also factoring in like walking to the car, walking to my place, all that stuff. So yeah, it's typically about like a 6.5 to 7 hour work day just with the game portion. And then of course I'm going live for an hour, then I'm editing the audio and for the podcast version. And so yeah, it's game nights are a bit hectic. It's very overstimulating, all the lights and the sounds and the music and all that stuff. Like it's a lot, but also a lot of caffeine. But I love it. It's the best thing in the world. So that is a typical game night. Next one from Mike Hooley 4208. If the Lakers have a first round exit or worse this year, does JJ enter the hot seat? I don't think so. The Lakers just gave him a 2-year extension entering his second season. He is under contract through the 2030 season. So we have seen the Lakers move on from coaches quickly, both with Frank Vogel and Darvin Ham. But I think in both instances, the coaches lost the locker room. And with the Vogel situation, there was the Russ backdrop kind of looming over everything, and his relationship and dynamic with Russ, and that just not being a good fit. And LA was trying to make that work, even though obviously that was a mistake and they should have just flipped Russ and I think kept Vogel. Then with the Darvin situation, things just went entirely south that second year. He lost the locker room about halfway through the season. They were able to kind of salvage it in the second half of the year, or final third of the year, let's say, of the regular season. But then they led for 70% of the series against Denver and still ended up losing in 5. So I think those are both exceptions more than the norm. I will note that things change quickly in the NBA, right? And so there's no assurance that JJ is going to be able to maintain the locker room throughout the course of the season. I've already said the vibes have been a little weird at times. I'm guessing now that likely had to do with this whole LeBron situation and it being a bit of a bummer, a bit of a downer for the group. But you never know in the NBA. Things change rapidly, and we see players get traded that we don't expect to get traded. Coaches get fired the year they win Coach of the Year. GMs get fired and quit. Like, it's just madness. The NBA is the best sports soap opera around. And so I don't want to say he's untouchable and that there's no scenario in which he's not on the hot seat, but this is a guy that the Lakers clearly have confidence in. They are committed to. They view this as a long-term partnership between Rob, Jeannie, and JJ. And I don't think that this season potentially going awry or maybe some underperformance, underachievement is going to lead to him being on the hot seat. Now, if they underperform and then maybe there's a second season of underperforming like next year, that maybe changes that dynamic. But for now, my understanding of just the whole situation, the whole dynamic, how they view it. They are very high on JJ. They were very encouraged by his rookie season, even with the early exit against Minnesota. And they view him, I mean, remember, this was a guy that, as we reported at The Athletic, Shams and I, they were viewing him as the next Pat Riley. And I think there were some things in that first season that they felt were in line with that. And I think like they view him as that Pat Riley, Eric Spoelstra, Steve Kerr, Ty Lue type of like franchise coach. And I think that's going to take some time, especially with him being relatively inexperienced and now having more experience, but still only entering his second season as a head coach. I think there's going to be a bit of a learning curve still, a bit of a development process with JJ as a head coach and a leader. I think he's been ahead of schedule overall, but with the Lakers, it's championship or bust every single season. So if they lose in the first round, if they miss the playoffs, if they're a play-in team, like that will fall on JJ's feet to some extent. But I don't think it's going to be enough to make him or to put him in the hot seat. I think he's going to be safe for the foreseeable future. I also think a big factor here is the relationship with Luka. Luka really likes him. Luka fucks with him. It's just a good dynamic. So as long as that is still there, and I anticipate it will be, I think JJ is going to continue to be the coach. Next one from Hardywood Away 9912. There's a reason that Ayton was dropped by 2 teams now. Do you think he will be on the Lakers for more than one season? It's a good question because I think in a way it's actually a bad thing for the Lakers if Ayton ends up being a Laker next season, because that probably means he underperformed or was just relatively underwhelming and did not earn himself a bigger payday next offseason. And so I think like it's counterintuitive, but if Ayton performs well, that actually increases the odds that he leaves and gets a payday from someone else. It could potentially be the Lakers, depending on what that contract looks like and what his production looks like and how happy they are with the fit and how happy Luka is with the fit and what happens with LeBron. Like there's a lot of variables here that will determine what next offseason looks like for the Lakers. I think it's going to be player performance. It's going to be fit with Luka. It's going to be Luka's feelings about those players. It's going to be LeBron, of course, and his future, Austin and his future, what happens with some of the other stars that could become available, like a Giannis or whatever. So there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of variables that will determine what the Lakers look like going into the 2026-27 season. But with Ayton, because he has that player option, it's more so if he does well, he's going to opt out and he's going to probably get a bag from someone else. If he does not do well, he will opt in. And, maybe year 2 is better than year 1, but it's actually probably a bad thing for the Lakers if he's opting in. Now, I think the contract is relatively team friendly enough where even if he doesn't outperform expectations, exceed expectations, that him on this deal, it's not going to like ruin the Lakers cap situation or just be this albatross. Like it's not high enough to really weigh things down. But I think that the counterintuitive dynamic here is that, to your point about teams giving up on him or not working out in other spots, it could theoretically work out with the Lakers and him do everything they need, buy in completely, have a great season individually and collectively. And yet that might price him out of the Lakers market and what they could realistically offer or kind of fit him into. So that's going to be a fascinating dynamic with the whole season. But I think it's actually going to be more if he underperforms and maybe does some of the things that wore out the welcome in those other spots, he's going to remain a Laker. and just because of the player option. And then if he actually overachieves or exceeds or just plays up to his capabilities, he's likely going to leave. So that's the interesting paradox here with what happens with Ayton this season. And final question from Glenn Clemita 7-1. How will Jake LaRavia's role be affected by who the fifth starter is? If Rui is the fifth starter, I can see him having a bigger role. This is especially timely with the LeBron injury update. So I said on my live, and I have not changed my mind on this, I think for now I would pencil in Rui and Jared Vanderbilt as the fourth and fifth starter. I think there's 3 starting locks with LeBron out, Luka, Austin, and Deandre Ayton. That leaves a couple of spots. I personally would probably go with Marcus Smart and Rui as the fourth and fifth guys, but I think given the uncertainty with Marcus's Achilles situation, him being in and out of camp and not yet playing in the preseason, and maybe the Lakers needing to manage this Achilles injury into the beginning of the season, I could see him coming off of the bench and just having a little bit of a smaller role to start the season. So I think for now, it's likely going to be Rui and Vando as the 2 starters. But I will say, given JJ's proclivity for spacing and shooting threes and stuff, maybe it ends up being Smart. Maybe it ends up being Jake LaRavia. I have not ruled out those possibilities. Those guys in place of Vando. I just think ideally, Rui is like the like-for-like LeBron replacement. He's the closest thing to a LeBron replacement from a size perspective and just like a offensive firepower perspective from like the role players. And then from a defensive perspective, I think that's a conversation between Vando, Smart, and LaRavia. But Vando is healthier than Smart right now, and he's a better defender than LaRavia. So I would give him the slight edge, but certainly LaRavia or Smart could play their way into that. But with LaRavia, I agree, like when this team is at full strength, if it is Rui, I think that probably slots LaRavia a little bit higher or gives him a little bit more potential for a bigger role, because he could sub in for LeBron or Rui and keep the composition of that starting group and sort of the spirit, the ethos of that group and their identity. If Rui comes off the bench, though, I do think that nudges Jake a little bit further back, because I think Rui slots ahead of him. And I just think Rui's guaranteed a certain amount of playing time in a certain role. So I think I could see, like, it's a small thing. I don't see this dramatically impacting Jake's role either way. I think that we're talking about potentially a matter of a few minutes. Like, it could be a 2 to 3 minute difference whether Rui starts or Rui comes off the bench. I do agree, though, in theory, that if Rui is starting, I see Jake as like either the Rui or LeBron primary backup. I think if Rui's coming off the bench, he's probably more the LeBron backup, and there's less of a clear backup role for Jake. I think it's going to kind of be more of a mishmash depending on the lineup and the identity and what they're trying to do. And especially if it's Smart, you have Jake in competition now with Rui and Vando for the front court minutes and for those like wing/forward roles. Whereas if I would throw Vando in here too. I think if Vando or Rui starts, that then slots Jake as like the second wing/front court guy. But then if it's Smart, I think that slots those 2 guys off the bench, and that moves Jake down to maybe third in the pecking order. So I could see a slight difference in his role and his playing time depending on who's starting versus who's coming off the bench. For now, though, I think there's a real opportunity for him to carve out a bigger role within the rotation to show what he could really do with LeBron being out. And I think everyone gets to do a little bit more. I think, of course, Luka has got to perform at an MVP level. Austin, the numbers without LeBron last year in the 9 games, he was like 27 points, 8 assists, and really good shooting percentages. So I think Austin's going to step up in a big way. You got Ayton and Rui who could both do more, and those guys will welcome more touches, more shots, more points. We know that. But I think LaRavia is also another guy who can make the most of this opportunity and potentially have a bigger role moving forward because of this. But I agree with you in theory, though, like the hierarchy, the pecking order, it does change slightly whether Rui's coming off the bench or starting. But I think either way, Jake's going to probably be a guy in the high teens into low 20s overall from a minutes perspective. But that will do it for today's episode. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back tomorrow with a live draft of the top 25 Lakers over the past 25 years. I will not give you any more details other than that, but check it out, 12 p.m. Pacific time on YouTube. We'll, of course, be posting an audio version as well. But looking forward to that tomorrow. I'll talk to you then.